Ladies and gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind taking your seats, we're about to discuss coal transition and coal phase out. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished representatives, esteemed guests, good afternoon and thank you for joining us for an action-packed session that is designed to answer one critical question. How do we move away from using coal for power generation? Coal that is a valuable energy source that is responsible for more than a quarter of all emissions. And how do we do that in a way that is pragmatic, affordable and equitable? I am Claire Perry-O'Neill. I'm the former UK Minister for Energy and Clean Growth. I authored some of the action plan for Cop28 and I had the great honour of founding in 2017 the Powering Past Coal Alliance along with my friend Catherine McKenna, Minister in Canada at the time. And in the next 90 minutes we will be joined by an extraordinarily talented group of experts and practitioners. And I know we are all grateful to the Cop28 presidency for making accelerated coal phase out such an important theme of the Energy Day at COP. During this event, I would like to achieve one goal: that you leave this beautiful space better informed, more optimistic, and thinking hard about how you can participate in the solutions proposed today. And I will check back in with you at the end of the session to see if we have achieved that goal. Meanwhile, to frame our discussions, it is my honour to introduce His Excellency Adnan Amin, the Cop28 CEO, to share some opening remarks. He needs no introduction, but I do want to just for a moment acknowledge his extraordinary career as a key part of the energy transition, as the founding Director General of IRENA and as a tireless advocate for the transition on the world stage. Your Excellency, please join us.
Well, thank you very much for those very kind words, Claire. And ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'm delighted to join for this particular event because we have been, together with our partners, looking at how the decarbonization process of the energy transition will go ahead and the role that coal plays in that and how we can accelerate all the considerations around the phase-out of coal. At Cop28, we have made the science the central tenet of how we are approaching every element of the action agenda, as well as the negotiation space. This year's IPCC report and the GST synthesis report have emphasized that the science demands a strong mitigation outcome at Cop28 that drives significant emissions reductions. That's why we've made fast-tracking the energy transition a key priority of our presidency agenda. We must build the energy system of the future while rapidly decarbonizing the energy system of today if we are to keep 1.5 within reach as our North Star. As the COP President, Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, has made clear, the phase down of demand for and supply of all unabated fossil fuels is both inevitable as it is essential. To help deliver on this, the UAE is proud to announce today that it is officially joining the Powering Past Coal Alliance. As part of this, we will work with nearly 60 other member countries to accelerate a responsibly managed transition away from coal power to clean energy. This is an alliance created in 2017 at COP23 in Bonn, led by the governments of the UK and Canada, and in fact, led by our MC today, Claire O'Neill, who has done such a magnificent job in taking it forward. We believe this is an important step that demonstrates the UAE's commitment and leadership as host of Cop28 to unleash the future zero-carbon energy system. Ladies and gentlemen, the world must accelerate the energy transition in an orderly, just, fair and equitable way that accounts for energy security and ensures that finance and technology is available for developing countries. The phase down of coal is a key part of this transition, and the numbers are clear. Coal-based power makes up roughly 27% of global energy and industry-related emissions. If we retire 1 gigawatt of coal-powered electricity early, we could reduce emissions by 2 to 4 metric tons of CO2 equivalent every year. This corresponds to removing almost 1 million internal combustion engine vehicles from the roads. Yet the shift away from coal is not straightforward. There is significant locked-in and unrecoverable capital in coal assets in the Global South. Coal plants in Asia and Africa are also significantly younger compared to those in the Global North, with long-term take-or-pay energy agreements already in place. 2 years ago in Glasgow, parties successfully agreed on the need to phase down unabated coal power. We must now provide the necessary tools to help move into implementation mode and really deliver on these outcomes. This will require innovation, innovative climate finance mechanisms, including high-integrity transition credits that can assist both governments and corporations in facilitating the management of early retirement. These credits can demonstrate a plausible solution by providing an alternative revenue stream from the sale of carbon credits. While there is growing momentum and interest in this approach with transition credits, there's an urgent need for market demand signals to make this mechanism come to life. Governments and financial institutions must move to purchase transition credits once they become available, and your assistance is needed to identify utilities that can benefit from this transition, from these transition credits as a pathway towards early retirement. We look forward to your engagement and collaboration on this critical issue to help ensure that Cop28 can truly deliver on fast-tracking the just energy transition that is a central part of our mandate at this COP. Thank you very much for being with us, and we look forward to a very interesting and robust discussion on this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for framing what we're here today to discuss so well. And many congratulations on joining PPCA. So far at this COP, we have the US joining, there's Czech Republic, multiple other members, and of course it's not just states joining, it is subnational actors and companies. By the way, it's only day 5 of COP, so there's plenty of time if you haven't joined to sign up. Applications are still accepted. And of course, we've had many attempts to accelerate this transition before. We've talked a lot about PPCA. In 2021, we launched the JET-P structure at COP26, which was an attempt to put a whole transition package around a specific economy. And we have other frameworks emerging in the US and elsewhere. And part of all of the solutions is unlocking blended finance, with the role of philanthropic capital seen as crucial in that mix. And as our next speaker on that very topic, I'm delighted to introduce my esteemed friend, Dr. Andrew Steer, formerly President and CEO of the World Resources Institute, and now CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund, which is committed to spend $10 billion by 2030, including on programs to decarbonize energy and industry. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you for your leadership. We are very grateful. Thank you, Adnan. You shouldn't be looking so lively and cheerful and happy and young at this stage, but you do. And that in and of itself is a sign that we are moving in the right direction. Thank you for what you're doing. I mean, the logistics alone are mind-boggling. The politics are complex. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we are with you in every regard in the coming week to be as helpful as we can. Look, as Adnan and Claire have both said, powering past coal is surely a very smart thing to do. It is perhaps the single most powerful action we can take to address climate change. Coal accounts, as you all know, for 45% of global energy-related emissions, and we will have to work very, very hard over the next 8 years to move from 36%, which currently is the ratio of power that is generated by coal in the world, to less than 4% by 2030. This sounds like a massive, impossible task, but actually it isn't. The System Change Lab just brought out a report in the last couple of days looking at 10 countries that had accelerated their powering past coal at that speed. The winners of the list were Greece and the United Kingdom. Greece lowered its share from 51% in 2014 to just 10% in 2022. The United Kingdom reduced coal power from 39% in 2012 to just 2% in 2020. So it can be done. It is a no-brainer. It makes economic sense. Done right, it makes social sense, but it still requires money, and that's what I want to talk about briefly. We have all seen the numbers. You've seen the Stern-Songway report and various other IEA estimates. The developing and emerging world, excluding China, will need to increase their investment in clean and transitioned energy sevenfold by 2030 to $1.9 trillion a year. Impossible? Well, currently, under the models, yes, it is. Wonderful progress politically on the JETPs in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in South Africa, and others now coming on stream. But if you look at the financing numbers, they are a little squishy. We need to find some more grant and grant look-alike funds. Let me suggest that carbon markets are the great untapped opportunity here. 2 days ago, we launched the Energy Transition Accelerator, bringing together a dozen very large companies that are willing to engage in voluntary carbon markets for decommissioning and for renewable energy. And we brought to the table some countries that are very keen on it. And importantly, some of the standard setters that have been a little bit in the way because they've been not giving enough credit for carbon markets. And so one of the reasons at the moment that carbon credits are not flowing is because companies feel that they are not getting credit. And recently the standard setting agency ICVCM, VCMI rather, came out with a very good and very important new ruling that says that up to 50% of Scope 3 legitimately in the near term could be offset. We've done the numbers, and it suggests that actually it's possible that you could get enough money from carbon markets to actually pay for almost all of the non-commercially viable part of coal decommissioning. This is incredibly exciting, and it's an honor to work with the Rockefeller Foundation, US State Department, and others in making that work. And there are other initiatives too. The Coal to Clean Credits Initiative, the 3CI, is doing some fascinating work in Philippines and elsewhere, showing that actually looking at the cost of decommissioning, financing it through carbon credits, can play a huge, huge opportunity. Closing a coal plant requires, as Adnan says, not only closing it down, more importantly, the just transition, and also recognizing it has a life ahead of itself which needs to be compensated. In terms of renewable energy, of course, that can be financed largely commercially, although it still needs some help in the capital stack, and philanthropy and carbon markets can play a very important role there too. So look, my message to you all is let's power past coal quickly. Thank you very much.
As inspiring as always. Thank you so much, Andrew. You've helped us understand why we need to get off coal You've explained what we need to do. We need to commit to no new coal and shut as rapidly as possible plants around the world. And you've given us some solutions, some of the hows. It's about financial flows, using markets, commercialising some solutions which can look very uneconomic at the moment. But when we double-click on the how, we start to see the problems. And you alluded to one of the problems, which is how do we set viable standards that we have high integrity. And on that point, I would like to invite up our first panel to discuss the integrity credit process. Transition credits, just by way of background, I'm sure you all know this, but they're a new class of high integrity asset that are generated from the replacement of coal with cleaner energy. They can provide alternative revenue into the project, but also a capital structure that can enable essentially the current asset owners to shut down the plant early. And for our next session, we have with us representatives from leading methodology developers, Gold Standard, Vera, ADB and Winrock, who will share their insights on the development of the integrity of the credits. And the panel will be moderated by Vishal Agarwal, who is a senior partner at McKinsey and leads the firm's sustainability work in Southeast Asia. Panel, if you would like to make your way up to the stage, and Vishal, if you'd like to come and moderate. Thank you very much indeed.
Taking the seat, I just wanted to summarize the context as we heard from His Excellency Adnan and Andrew Steer, right? So coal is about a quarter of global emissions. Yes, please. And if we don't address coal immediately, we are going to blow up our carbon budget between now and 2030. There have been various attempts to address the early retirement of coal-fired power plants. It's not easy. And if I just summarize some of the big challenges is, number one, there are communities and just energy transition elements that need to be taken care of. Number two, many countries are actually trying to balance hard energy poverty, growth, security, and transition. And all of these need to be addressed together. And third, if I look at the global south and Asia, emerging Asia in particular, which is where more than half of the coal-fired power plants are, the average age of this fleet is less than 14 years. There's a lot of sunk capital. And what all these three elements do is it creates an economic gap. And there's only so much concessionary capital that is going to go around to address the early retirement of all of these 1,500 gigawatts of coal-fired power plants in Asia alone. And this is where this whole innovative market-based mechanism of using transition credit could play a very vital role. As Claire was talking about, the transition credit is basically an instrument that gets generated as you reduce the emissions from coal-fired power plants and replace it with clean energy. This can be used to replace the revenue stream, but also can be used to capitalize the structures. However, as we do this, very important that we take into consideration the highest integrity standards, the transparency are met, and all the elements of just energy transitions are met. In this context, we have our four panelists here who have been working on this for many years and will share views on what does it take to do this, but in a manner that can build the right foundation for early retirement of coal-fired power plants. Right? So we'll have our four esteemed panelists here, starting with Toby, who's the Chief Program Development and Innovation Officer at Vera. We have Owen, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Gold Standard. Andrew Jeffries, who's an advisor at Asia Development Bank, and Mary, who's the CEO of Environmental Resources Institute, which is a subsidiary, non-profit subsidiary of Winrock and working with the US ETA, right? So we'll start with the panel. Feel free to join here. There's no one here. Yeah. Let me start with you, Andrew. Asia Development Bank has been one of the leaders and champions on driving the early retirement of coal-fired power plants, starting with the ETM and then with the JETP. If you could start by giving a view of the journey, where are you? What does it take to really accelerate from a few pilot power plants to really doing this at scale? What will unlock?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. You know, we've embarked on this journey now for a number of years. We've committed as an institution to $100 billion of climate finance by 2030 and 75% of our operations supporting climate initiatives by 2030. And regarding the energy transition mechanism, you know, the rationale I think is very clear and known to everyone. Without addressing the emissions from coal-fired power plants, we can't meet our climate targets under the Paris Agreement. So this initiative was launched at Cop28 in Glasgow. And we've had pre-feasibility studies completed for Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Pakistan, and Kazakhstan. We've done detailed feasibility work in Indonesia, and that's in process in the Philippines. We've assisted Indonesia with Climate Investment Fund Accelerating Coal Transition, or CIF Act funds, $500 million of concessional funding to support early coal retirement. And we're in the process of working with development partners, the World Bank Group, for the Philippines application for those funds. We're working on our first pilot transaction now. A few days ago, we signed a framework agreement with PLN of Indonesia and Cirebon Electric Power. We've just today signed an MOU with the Monetary Authority of Singapore to raise up to $2 billion of concessional funds to add more concessional capital to this initiative. So to date, you know, we're looking to use climate finance to lower the cost of capital and make these transitions work. And we're working very hard with our partners to get this first transaction off the ground to establish its financial viability and then learn by doing and then seek to replicate it, you know, around the region where applicable. And to segue into the kind of the topic of this panel, we are also working on registering a carbon credit methodology for early coal retirement that we seek to register in the first quarter of 2024.
Fantastic. On that note, I did hear about, Toby, if I come to you, some of the announcements that came out where the pilot projects are going to use or apply to Vera for credit writing, right? If you can talk about how do you decide which power plants will meet the standards of integrity and transparency? And in general, how do these credit instruments adhere to the just energy transition principles? Just give us a flavor of the highest standards of integrity that the methodologies would follow.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Vishal. Great to be here. So as some of you may have noticed, yesterday Vera announced the first public consultation of the Clean to Coal Credit Initiative methodology supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. And that methodology is starting its first consultation. We'll go through a second consultation. It's already had 5 international workshops with leading countries, utilities, legal experts, and civil society to make sure that the methodology is not only robust technically, is using the right methods, conservative approaches, and safeguards, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but also it's going to be workable. And that's going to be critical if we're going to scale up this kind of mechanism. So that's the beginning of its consultation, and there was another announcement yesterday too with ASEAN in the Philippines that you'll hear more about from Eric in the next panel, that's basically going to be piloting the methodology with support and interest from the government of Singapore as a potential Article 6.2 opportunity transfer at MOS. In terms of the safeguards and the integrity of the methodology, I can talk a little bit, for example, around the just transition, which is a key part of the methodology, and I think of all the standards in this space. One is a ring-fenced share of proceeds that goes to just transition, including training, new jobs, local community support. Also, the methodology requires that KPIs be established upfront at validation stage, and those KPIs will be used to basically assess whether the actual intended objectives of just transition are being achieved and delivered by the project. And those will be tracked, monitored, and independently verified at each carbon verification. And unless they're met, there will be no credits issued. So basically what we're trying to do is build integrity in upfront, both with conservative methods, the right safeguards, and then make sure that that's enforced and activated during each verification.
Mary, if I take a segue into this, right, I was ecstatic to see the announcement yesterday where I saw different methodology writers come together and issue joint statement. That does not happen often, at least has not happened in the past before this COP. So it was very good to see that. Would love to hear from you what kind of collaboration are the different methodology writers talking about? And in particular, I understand a differentiated approach that Windrock has on the jurisdictions. So it would be good to get some color on that as well.
Certainly. So yesterday we announced a collaboration with the crediting standards that I manage, ACR and ART, as well as Gold Standard and Verra and the Climate Action Reserve and the Global Carbon Council. All of us are approved by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, to supply credits to what is the first global compliance carbon market. We came together many months ago to start working on this joint statement of how we can work together to enhance integrity and help countries achieve their Paris Agreement targets, their NDCs, by working with the independent crediting standards. And we laid out a work plan that we will be working on for the next year together on different integrity actions that we can take, including working directly with countries themselves to operationalize Article 6. With regard to the crediting standard for the Energy Transition Accelerator that we have been developing, and we actually published the key elements of that earlier this week when the Energy Transition Accelerator update was launched. The key to it is it's a jurisdictional and sectoral approach. Jurisdictional in that we're working with governments, so we're looking at a country level, and sectoral in that we're looking at the emissions from the entire electric power sector. So what we're doing with that is trying to incentivize governments to make the broad policy and regulatory shifts that are needed for long-term structural transformation. They can use, we want to incentivize a broad range of activities and not prescribe specific actions. So you could, for example, install renewable energy. You can also upgrade your grid and storage to be able to better accommodate the build out of renewables. You can decommission coal. You may have policy changes in dispatch priority for lower emissions technologies, incentives for off-grid renewables. So the crediting is looking at the entire sector and wanting to reduce emissions in a way that's most pragmatic and flexible for each country.
Fantastic. Owen, if I come to you, different ways to think about the additionality, right? All of this will boil down into who is the buyer and how you're creating demand for these kind of credits, both on abating 1 and 2, but also on the scope 3. I know Gold Standard, and you have been thinking about it, would be great to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, there's a lot to think about there. I think one of the issues the carbon market has had is it likes to divide integrity and effectiveness into supply and demand as two separate things. But as we've seen, get either side of that wrong and it pulls the whole house down every time, and we have a real perception problem because of that. And two risks occur to me. One is that if we're talking about a transition credit and a just transition, if you have a buyer that in one country is supporting phase out, that's great. If in 10 other countries it's still investing in fossil, competing countries, competing interests, it really isn't great. And you create an injustice between those two things. So you can't separate the two in my mind. I think I would also say that on the Scope 3 side, as frustrating as value chain targets are, carbon credits have no place there. They make no sense from an accounting perspective. They disrupt the accountability mechanism fundamentally. And so we profoundly disagree with the idea that you can use carbon credits towards Scope 3. Having said that, under the current construct, although that doesn't work at all, it is important that companies support phase out, stress phase out, not phase down, phase out of coal assets. And it does require an honest conversation about how to enact Scope 3 value chain targets. We co-founded 2 initiatives there, one called the Value Change Initiative, which focused primarily on agriculture and apparel sectors, so land use. And the other is the AIM platform, which is looking at how you create market and non-market mechanisms that are designed for the purpose of accountability of value chains. So I can only sort of stress that point, really. I profoundly disagree with the idea you can use carbon credits for that purpose. Fantastic. Andrew, I had put a pin on this $2 billion thing that you had mentioned. I would love to understand, what is this $2 billion? You mentioned you signed something with MES to create a fund on early retirement of coal-fired power plants. And how should utilities think about it in accessing this fund that you just launched or you were talking about?
Really a fund per se. This was launched, with Monetary Authority of Singapore. Also, GIAP is putting in money, and it's meant to be used for ETM, energy transition mechanism, early coal retirement transactions, to be blended with commercial priced money, just to lower the cost of capital to the point where you can incentivize and enable independent power projects to retire early. That said, there's other ways to go about early coal retirement, and then there's utility-owned plants, and not as opposed to IPPs, and it just can be used creatively and for other transition initiatives as well.
Got it. Mary, as I think about these credits, from whatever we have discussed so far, it seems there has to be a strong overlap/complement with the Article 6. Can you talk about how does Article 6 discussions play into creating more demand for this and can potentially give more tailwind into development of these kind of credits?
Sure. Well, obviously under Article 6.2, that allows governments to cooperate to enhance ambition. And one of the things that we're seeing right now is activity around cooperation, and much of that activity is occurring with credits that are being generated or issued by independent standards like ourselves. So credits that could be generated from these activities could be used by countries to enhance ambition under Article 6. I suppose we're going to see what happens with 6.4. That's still being negotiated, and not sure how these activities will fit into that framework. But the energy sector has always been a critical part of crediting for reducing emissions for obvious reasons. So I would like to think that that's also going to be part of Article 6.4.
Yeah. Toby, if I come to you, there has been in the recent past a lot of questions around the carbon markets in general, especially around the whole nature-based solution. As the methodology developers try to create this new asset class around transition credits, it's very important to build a very strong base, have pilots that adhere to higher standards of integrity. What are your thoughts on how do credit methodologies writers and developers and the project developers are going to ensure that as we do some of these projects, we don't repeat the mistakes from the past, and we're really creating a watertight asset class that can really accelerate this transition?
Yeah, as you pointed out, there's been definitely a lot of attention paid in particular to natural climate solutions and integrity from some of the credits and projects associated with that. that sector, NCS, is inherently, I'd say, challenging, more challenging from an accounting perspective than energy and industrial type activities like coal transition. And in this case, as I mentioned, one of the key things is to get the right folks, experts, technical experts, civil society and others and scientists to basically have them help build the right accounting within the methodology. It's the conservative grid emissions factors, whether it's using financial analysis to back up any claims about when a particular plant might be retired so that it's not overly aggressive, and we're taking conservative assumptions there too. And I think that that's the design is critical of the actual methodology itself. Then there's the piloting, which will reveal some really useful lessons, and that's going to be started in the Philippines shortly, that we can learn from and improve the methodology and application of it in context of projects. And then finally is through the consultative process. So in this case, we're actually running 2 consultations, which is unusual. First, a public consultation launched yesterday that actually is the draft methodology, but is asking questions, open questions about how things could be improved. Are there any gaps? Are there any issues that could create openings for integrity questions? And then those will, all the feedback, all the comments, the expert and scientific input will then be incorporated into the second and final version of the methodology. We'll go out for public consultation again. And then we hope through that process and the 18 months of development through technical experts that's happened to date will result in a very robust methodology, and the piloting and then the application will ensure that it actually delivers.
Yeah. And I heard Gold Standard has also launched a consultation process on its methodology, right? I would like to understand, how do you think about different power plants? Like each power plant is very different, depending on the capacity factor, depending on technology. Some of these replacement would need solar versus wind versus storage. So how does the methodology take into consideration all the different and very individualistic elements of a particular power plant while still maintaining that high standards of integrity?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, clearly. So just a framing of the methodology from our side. So the IEA was quite clear in calling for a time-bound phase-out of fossil fuel. So the first thing to say is the method requires the closure of within a limited time frame, not a phase-down or a mothballing option or anything like that, a phase-out. And it also, IEA called for a direct, at least one-to-one replacement with renewable energy. So no other options, renewable energy. So that's what the methodology is based on. The emissions reductions are issued for the generation of the renewable energy against the baseline of fossil. And that baseline itself is based on the most conservative of 3 options, either the plant itself, the best performing equivalent device in the country, or the national factor, and you take the most conservative of those and keep that up to date. So in a way, a better way to read the methodology rather than something new, in my mind, is it's the natural successor to the pre-existing renewable energy methodologies in the carbon markets, whereas rather than taking a generic baseline, you're taking the specific device removal. And we've taken that view because it follows the science very clearly. It allows us to be very clear in principle and then have the flexibility to create different solutions on the ground to suit. I think the other reason we've done it is because when it comes to just transition, the reality is, as somebody who comes from a former coal field myself, you can't enact a just transition at a national level. A jurisdictional level doesn't work for that. It's an important factor, but it's, you have to act at the device level to be able to do that. You have to deal with the loss of jobs and employment and economics in the area directly affected by the closure. So in that sense, I think we've done a pretty good job of, I'd like to think so anyway, of keeping the very clear science-led, principle-led approach. And they have quite a lot of flexibility within that to sort of mark the pathway to the new renewable generation.
Andrew, when I heard from Owen, he talked about a lot of risks, about mothballing, jobs, etc., right? As you structure a transaction, how do you think about identifying each one of these risks, pricing it, parceling it appropriately? For example, country risk. What if a particular country decides to not shut down these plants 7 years or 10 years down the line? Because these are events that need to happen in the future. And there are many other risks associated with a new asset class. So as you think about pilots, as you think about creating this, what are some of the risks that you have identified and you are trying to address through these pilot and demonstration plans?
I guess at the country level, it starts with, you know, a no new coal policy. You know, it doesn't make much sense to, you know, work hard on retiring coal, you know, without that. And thinking about the project level, you know, this is a big concern. You know, a lot of, we've had a lot of questions on, oh, you're going to do a financial transaction, recapitalize a coal-fired power plant, keep the owners return neutral, but by bringing the end date forward. Well, what happens if at the end of the shortened PPA period, you know, the plant doesn't shut down? So we're putting a lot of effort into that. That's one of the reasons why there's, you know, an agreement with the government and with PLN and the owner about how that will work at the end. There's discussions around, you know, the possible how to, you know, make sure the business license is altered or what have you. But another thing is, I think it was mentioned, you know, a lot of these plants are in this region, particularly Southeast Asia, are young, 15-year average age. So, you know, it's one thing to think about retiring a 40-plus year plant. Whoever owns it has probably already recovered their investment, it's depreciated and the like. Now, with investment, you can keep these plants going for a long time. But with such a young asset, you know, the return hasn't been made yet. And so anyway, hence the concessionality and all. But it's very, very important to have a firm agreement and understanding and legal mechanism in place to actually ensure the closure at the end. And the first pilot transactions actually that we're working on, INA, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Indonesia, is actually going to become a part equity owner in the plant. So that means that the government, who has a very impressive commitment to you know, net zero by 2050 and early coal phase out, you know, is kind of going to be involved as equity in the transaction going forward. But you know, every transaction, every country, every situation will be different. But I think the establishing a legal basis for that closure is very important.
Yeah. I see Claire is trying to come up and give us a signal. So final comments, 15 seconds from each one of you, starting with you, Mary.
Well, let's get this moving, right? We're running out of time. The urgency with which we need to raise massive amounts of private capital to complement other sources to phase out fossil fuels is absolutely critical. So let's get moving.
Andrew.
You know, we're all learning by doing. You know, this is new stuff, and you know, the pilot may not be perfect, but it's a stepping stone and a learning exercise in and of itself on how to move forward and scale up further. So it takes collaboration amongst all the different experts, whether it's carbon credits, whether it's you know, technical aspects or system planning. It takes a huge collaboration. The financiers, the concessional donors giving the concessional money. It's a huge collaborative effort. That probably exceeded my 15 seconds.
Owen.
I agree. I would say two quick things. None of this works if buyers carry on investing in fossil with the left hand while they're buying these credits with the right. And second, we all need to stop trying to make use of carbon credits for things that aren't carbon credits, things like Scope 3.
Yeah, and from Farah's perspective, I mean, we see this as one of the most exciting new sectors that we've ever worked on. And remarkably, to Mary's point, it's moving very fast. And concretely, this isn't now just hot air. We're seeing methodology standards, pilots, government commitments. This is a gigaton opportunity, and we've all got to roll up our sleeves to make it happen.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I would just like to, you know, spend a minute in summarizing some of the key takeaways as a segue into the next segment. The first message I'm taking away is there is no option. We must work on this, otherwise we are blowing up our carbon budget. The second message I'm taking away is the concession capital is not going to cut it. We need a market mechanism to drive this transition. And it's heartening to see in the last 12 to 18 months, the collaboration amongst different organizations, the collaboration amongst capital providers and methodology writers and insurance and utility companies to come together. And hopefully we see more of these pilot projects and demonstration plans. The third message that I'm taking away is as we do these pilot projects, it's very important to maintain very high standards of integrity, very high standards of transparency. As you said, Andrew, we won't get everything right. We'll learn from it. But as we do it, we need to ensure that we continue to maintain those highest standards of integrity and transparency. The fourth message was once the pilot is done, it's only a start. We are hoping that the world will opt into this. All of you will opt into this. You have many technical partners that are available for help, as you heard from our panelists as well. And we are hoping that this will result in a snowball effect on many things. In fact, the last message then is if this works, I think this can provide a roadmap for all the other sectors which are hard to abate to really design an economically viable pathways for transitioning and not just rely on concessional finance. With that, thank you everyone, and we move to the next segment. Over to you, Claire.
Well, we promised you a deep dive, and that was just, it's so inspiring to see this standardization, this transparency, this urgency, and these place-based solutions, which were so very specific. And to deep dive a little more into how you go from the 10,000-foot ambition to the action at the plant level, what the financing needs are to unlock that. I'm going to invite our second panel up on the stage, who are going to be guided by Elizabeth Yee of the Rockefeller Foundation, who's going to look really closely at this blended financial package. Elizabeth is the EVP of Programs at Rockefeller, where she's implementing their $1 billion 5-year strategy to slow the climate crisis while advancing human opportunity. And she's going to be joined on stage by representatives from the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the Asian Development Bank, and the energy companies ASEAN from the Philippines and PLN from Indonesia. Panel, please do come and join us on the stage.
All right, so in the spirit of keeping the time while my panel gets on stage, I will kick us off, but thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. And I also wanted to acknowledge the contributions of my colleague, Dr. Joseph Curtin, who's been leading this work on behalf of the Foundation. For those who don't know us, the Foundation has been around for 110 years, and we've been focused on a mission of advancing the well-being of humanity. And we're in this space specifically because we feel that this is the moment that we need to ensure that we're looking at human vulnerability and the changes that we actually need in order to drive a just transition. And that's why most recently, and that's what Claire just said, we've been focused on climate change. That is our recent mandate. And over the next 5 years, we'll commit $1 billion to make sure that we ensure a just transition. Now, part of this work, and this is why this panel and the work here is so important, transition credits, carbon markets, like Andrew mentioned, are a critical part of this ecosystem. And so we're very grateful that the Cop28 presidency has put its weight behind this idea, and that we're really providing a platform for actors across this ecosystem to make this a reality. We're taking a portfolio approach to the work at the Foundation here. And so as Andrew mentioned, and joined by some of our colleagues from Bezos Earth Fund, we've been working on a number of different things. One was the Energy Transition Accelerator that was mentioned earlier today to create a marketplace for buyers and sellers to come together around these credits and catalyzing private sector to come into the space. We've also launched the Coal to Clean Credits Initiative in June, where we're, in that instance, creating a methodology to try to monetize carbon savings that enable us to retire coal plants early and replace them with clean power. And just yesterday, the 3CI methodology and team announced a new collaboration with other organizations, ASEAN and MAST, who were joined here today to explore a pilot project in the Philippines, which we're very excited about. And if successful, this would be one of the first of its kind projects in the world. And so I'm excited to hear more from our panelists and to learn from them today around the opportunity that we had at hand. So let me go over and introduce our panel and get this conversation started. I think since I'm mic'd, you can hear me. Yes, perfect. Okay, great. So I'm thrilled to introduce our panel. I'm joined here today by 4 individuals. First is Eric Francia. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of ASEN Corporation, and under his leadership, Ayala has become one of the largest renewable energy platforms in the Asia region. I'm also joined here today by Ravi Menon, who is the Managing Director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, or MAS, and he has been in that role since 2011. Darmawan Prasojo is the CEO of PLN, Indonesia's largest power utility, or only power utility. And then Cleo Kawawaki is the head of the Office of Markets Development and Public-Private Partnerships at the Asian Development Bank. And so in terms of process, I'm going to start with each panelist. I'm going to have one question each. And then hopefully we'll get to more than one, because I'd love to elicit a conversation from these esteemed guests. So first, Eric, I'm going to start with you. So as mentioned yesterday, our organizations announced our intention to work together to explore the world's first coal-to-clean project in the Philippines, leveraging transition credits. And so could you tell us a little bit more about the pilot and how transition credits could be used to help bring forward the retirement date of this plant?
Thank you, Liz, and a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Perhaps just a little bit of context, ASEN, the listed energy platform of Ayala Group, has made a shift from fossil fuel to renewables around 5 years ago. We decided to go for 100% renewable energy generation by 2025. So we've scaled up. We used to be more than 80% coal, thermal, and 20% renewables. We'll flip that around. We're now close to 98% renewables, targeting 100% by 2025, and therefore it entailed a responsible divestment of coal plants. And this was 2 years ago. We then decided to divest SLTech, a 246 megawatt coal plant, but we were given a very hard-hitting questions by some of our ESG investors, such as, aren't you just passing that problem to somebody else by divesting? And they had a point, and we had a dilemma. But we wanted to be 100% renewables, because then ESG investors will not invest in us, and how can we scale up if we were not 100% renewables? So thanks to the idea, the eureka moment for us when ADB was pushing for this concept of ETM, which was not so familiar to us, and we said that this can be done in a market-based, driven by the private sector, so that we can move faster. And that's what we did, and the good news is that we closed the world's first market-based ETM about a year ago, in November of 2022. We've already gotten the proceeds, and we're in the process of redeploying that capital. With that divestment comes a commitment to retire the coal plant after 25 years of operations, which is 2040. Coal plants typically last until 40-plus years, so therefore there is that additionality. However, we said that given that IEA maintains, and we believe in the science, International Energy Agency, that 55% of the coal plants globally should be reduced between 2022 to 2050 and close to zero by 2040. So we thought that while it is ambitious for us to retire by 2040, we gave ourselves the optionality of accelerating that and potentially retire the coal plant by 2030 in a responsible and just manner. But as you all know, we don't run a charity, we run a sustainable enterprise. So we believe, and it was mentioned earlier, that one such mechanism that will help us realize this aspiration, this increased ambition, is a combination of not only blended finance, but I think I cannot agree more with what has been said earlier, that transition credits is a huge opportunity to really unlock the potential of accelerating coal plants. We need to do it in a just manner. Number one, we need to replace those foregone cash flows of the coal plants to justify to our shareholders. Number two, we need to ensure that we have clean energy replacement. And by clean energy, I just don't mean build more solar and wind. It needs to be reliable, dispatchable. We don't want to create more problems for the grid if we just leave it as intermittent and leave the hidden cost of the transmission. So we need to make it reliable and affordable. Unfortunately, with the price of integrated energy, renewable energy and energy storage today, it could very well increase the price to the consumers, but with the help of transition credits, we will be able to close that gap. Number three, we need to do it in a just transition manner, ensuring that we are including the community and the workers in this transition. And by the way, we need to decommission the plant in a responsible manner. Those three will have a certain attached value to that. And thanks to the partnership that we just signed yesterday with 3CI and Monetary Authority of Singapore, there is much promise that it can be done. So the next 6-12 months will be exciting. There's going to be a lot of learnings, but we very much look forward to that and make this a reality.
Thank you so much. That's great to hear what's happening. I wanted to turn to Ravi next. We're really excited to partner with you on this to advance this pilot project. We're hopefully going to set history together. But more broadly, Singapore has been very active in leading energy transition efforts in Asia. So wanted to hear a little bit more about how your recent work in enabling energy transitions away from coal.
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. And first, let me congratulate the Cop28 presidency for this topic, because this is the single most important topic I can imagine for us to fight climate change. And I think I can skip my introduction because it has been well covered by the opening speeches in the earlier panel. I'll just add one data point. The world is not going to get to net zero without phasing out coal in Asia. For every 6 tons of greenhouse gas emissions emitted in the world into the atmosphere, 1 ton comes from a coal plant in Asia. And while people speak about scaling up renewables, and I think that's absolutely critical, that alone is not going to get us to net zero. You need to phase out the existing coal plants, because if those coal plants were to operate their full life, they're going to eat up 2/3 of the remaining carbon budget we have to keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that is the problem statement. So in Singapore, when we looked at this, we started with that problem statement and said, what is going to move the needle the most difficult problem that we need to solve, and what are the challenges? So when we unpack that, we realized that you cannot phase out coal in Asia without blended finance and without transition credits. Absolutely essential, because you have a cost of capital problem. Cost of capital in Asia is about typically 2 to 3 times higher than in Europe and America. And for many reasons, which I think you're all very familiar with. So we need to bring down that cost of capital. And blended finance is the way to do it. The other problem is the economics of coal phase out. Very young plants. We heard numbers from 10 to 15 years compared to 40 years in America. And so you have to address the economics of compensating the coal owners. And so transition credits become important. So that's how we unpack the problem, blended finance, transition credits. Now, for blended finance, we've asked ourselves, what is it that we need to make it work? We need 2 things, credibility and financial viability. Credibility, I would say 3 things, taxation, transition pathways, taxonomies, and industry guidance. So transition pathways. So the International Energy Agency has put out transition pathways for the global energy transition that's consistent with net zero by 2050. The only thing I would ask is that we need those transition pathways to be contextualized for Asia. And this is a discussion we've been having with the IEA, and they recognize this importance. Because once you have that, then it provides a marker of integrity that adds to credibility. The second thing we need is taxonomies. Taxonomies that set out criteria and thresholds for whether the transition is on track, whether the emissions reductions are being achieved. And so these are important, and these are set out in what we put together with the industry in Singapore, the Singapore Asia taxonomy. And that, I think, is another added element. And the third is industry guidance. Here I must commend the GFANS, Asia Pacific Network, the work they've done in putting out detailed guidance on how to address both credibility and viability for financial institutions engaged in managed phase-out. So we put all these together, then you build up a base of credibility for doing this in a way of integrity. Now, financial viability, blended finance and transition credits. So here I think much has been said about why we need blended finance and how it works. And what's amazing about COP28 this year is the number of initiatives that have been launched with a blended finance feature. And I think we need this 100 flowers to bloom and take shape and then synergize across them and then have more of these coming on stream. And for our part, Singapore launched a blended finance initiative. We call it Financing Asia's Transition Partnership, or FAST-P. And FAST-P targets to mobilize up to $5 billion in support of Asia's transition, with capital from both concessional and commercial sources globally. The Singapore government is willing to provide concessional capital to signal our commitment to play our part alongside other partners. We can't do this alone, but if other partners come alongside, we're willing to put concessional capital and then crowd in private capital. So just 2 days ago, as we heard, we signed an MOU with Allied Climate Partners, the International Finance Corporation, and Temasek on a green investment partnership under FAST-P. And just this morning, we're thrilled to have signed an MOU with the Asian Development Bank and the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, which is a philanthropic organization for a transition finance acceleration partnership. So it's gotten off to a good start. Now, but we also need transition credits to solve this problem. And this can be a very useful financing mechanism. We are thrilled to have worked with McKinsey on this working paper for transition credits for coal phase out. But we need to road test this idea. It's a good concept. It's gotten a lot of traction, but we need to test it out. And that's where these pilot programs are very important. I just want to read out some of the 30 I'm not going to read out all 30, but some of them who have come on board the traction, because you need to test this idea whether it works. And we've got a good spread of these workers, these people coming on board. So I think to close off, I'll just say blended finance and transition credits are the two key levers we have for coal phase out. And it's very heartening to see traction on both fronts. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really terrific. And partnerships are so critical in actually getting this right and moving. So appreciate that. I'd like to turn it over to Dharmawan from PLN. And I'd love for you to tell us a bit about your decarbonization ambitions and plans to achieve them. And then also if you could touch on PLN's interest in transition credits and how all of that comes together.
Yes, today the emission in the electricity sector in Indonesia is roughly 260 million metric tons. If we leave it alone, business as usual, it's going to increase to 1 billion metric tons by 2060, but we're not going to let this happen. So 3 years ago, as a board of directors of PLN, we redesigned our national electricity planning. At that time, we removed 13 gigawatt of coal in the planning phase. That's avoiding roughly 1 gigawatt is 6 million metric tons, multiplied by 25 years, multiplied by 13 gigawatt is roughly 1.8 billion metric tons of CO2 avoidance. And then also, I myself cancel one coal-fired power plant's PPA, 1.3 gigawatt, contract is 25 years, is roughly 220 million metric tons of CO2 being avoided. So to begin with, we understand we need to create more rooms for renewable energy development. And at that time, we also launched the net zero emission by 2060. And here, the biggest challenge here is not the renewable energy development. As I auction the renewable energy projects, the competition is very healthy. And the price of renewable energy is diminishing. The reduction of renewable energy price cost is roughly 53% in the last 3 years. So that means the humankind innovates and the price of renewable energy is going down. Before, when we're talking about cheap energy, it's dirty. Now when we're talking about cheap energy, it's clean. How about the coal? That is another challenge. And so we team up with the Asian Development Bank and come up with what we call the energy transition mechanism. So only 2 days ago, we signed the framework agreement of early retirement of Cirebon power. And this is the mechanism, is very simple. With the blended green finance, we are able to acquire low cost of fund. And this new business entity acquiring the old project developer, in which, because it's a lower cost, then we are able to expedite the payback, previously 2042 to become 2035. That's what we call the early retirement of the coal-fired power plants, using the energy transition mechanisms and also market-based, financings. That's avoiding roughly 25 million metric tons in the span of 7 years. So, of course, this is only a pilot project. We learned so much, so many challenges, also so many opportunities. And with this kind of first project, we going to be plan to able to scale things up. Because where do we go from here? Of course, we're not going to be able to replace coal with another coal. We need to come up with what we call the accelerated renewable energy development. So the 75% of the additional generation capacity in Indonesia from today until 2040 is coming from renewable energy. A lot of challenges, mismatch between the location of large-scale renewable energy with the demand. We need to build the green enabling transmission line, no transition without transmissions. Of course, the intermittency of the variable renewable energy, solar and wind. We need to build the smart grid, flexible generations, smart meter, etc., etc. And then we eliminate even in the vicinity of designing the new coal-fired power plants. There's no more coal in the pipeline of the planning phase. So in that regard, we did also the self-imposed carbon rating only last September, the Indonesian Carbon Exchange, and we listed the big carbon rating. We also work with the transition credit methodology with GIAP. Of course, with the transition credit, is going to be available, is going to improve the commercial viability of the early coal retirement. And with this kind of event, the Cop28 is giving us a sense of pride, some kind of conviction that previously fragmented global communities to become unified. So we have a strong conviction that we're going to be able to keep moving forward, regardless of the challenge ahead, and to get the mission accomplished. Of course, this is also giving us a sense of humility. This is a long, complex, fierce battle to combat climate change, and the long battle has just begun. Thank you.
The ambition is incredible. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to Cleo to close us out here. And I would love to hear, I think we could spend another half an hour together. But Cleo, if you could tell us a little bit about what ADB's work is and what it's been doing so far, and any lessons you've learned so far from the work that you've been doing.
Thank you. I guess we're at 0 already.
I know. I feel like Claire hasn't totally kicked us off. So bring us home. And I want to make sure we get a chance to hear from you.
So I'm going to try to be really quick. As Ravi said, this transformation, the transition from coal to renewable energy requires transition credit, as you said, and concessional finance. But I would like to add one more thing, which is the enabling environment. And the enabling environment is not just enabling environment, as Pagdarna said, in the country, but enabling environment in the market. We have to make that market. The transition credit market has to be developed, has to become vibrant. And the best way that we believe that market making could be done is by stretching the philanthropic donor money as much as possible to make the market more bankable, more stable. And we all understand that, we need to have the high quality credit, high quality market, and ADB would like to play its part in ensuring that it is high quality by the beginning and the pilot projects. What you said about road testing, we have a couple of cars to road test on your road. So, we're working with for Cirebon, and we have a new project. I'm really glad to announce that we have the mandate for Philippines Mindanao Coal. Wimpy's there. Thank you. You said Wimpy's there. And this one, we believe, is going to be fast-tracked. We will I mean, this was a coal-powered power plant, 200 megawatts, developed in 2006. And it was, well, the concession is until 2031, and that would have been 25 years. And then even if we stopped it there at 2031, it would still have had 15 years to go. But what we're discussing with the Philippines government is to cut that even down more so that the life would have been 20 and we would have 20 years of savings on carbon. And without carbon credit or without transition credit, this deal will not be feasible. I mean, we can ask all of the donors, all of the philanthropies to come in every single time to make the concessional funds. But, you know, we are very lucky with Japan and Germany kicking off our ETM fundraising for the concessional funds along with others. But that's not going to last. So we have to have the market. We have to develop the market. And I hope that everyone would support us in, well, support the world in getting rid of coal by developing the transition credit market.
That is a great note to end on. Thank you so much for all joining us here today, and wish you much success in all of the work you need to do.
Thank you very much, panel, too. I mean, so much inspiration on offer, a forensic focus on the how of the coal transition and a clear sense of determination from the central banks and the development banks to play a role in ensuring this market credibility, which brings me to a key question. What role do governments play? Andrew Steer referenced the UK, where we managed to drop coal from about 40% to almost zero, and we used a combination of carbon pricing and emissions standards to do that. Those are not tools that are available to every country in the world. But we know that individual countries are making huge strides, both in their own coal programs, but also in supporting this broader ecosystem. So now I'm going to invite representatives from 5 countries committed to the coal transition to join me on the stage to share their plans. And I warn you, ladies and gentlemen, I will try and courteously enforce a 3-minute speaking time. So could I please have the Right Honourable Graham Stewart, who I see is just entering the building, a bit like Elvis, please, who is the Minister for Energy and Net Zero in the UK. Felix Cuetabella, who is the Undersecretary for the Department of Energy in the Philippines. Stefan Crozat, who is the Climate Change Ambassador for France. Rick Duke, Deputy Special Envoy for Climate in the United States. And Catherine Stewart, Canada's Ambassador for Climate Change. I'll give you a moment to get up. I'm actually going to invite Stefan to speak. Oh, they're doing the meet and greet. That's wonderful. I'm going to. The running order is in my gift. Stefan, I'd love you to start, and then Graham, if you'd be prepared to come in after Stefan, that would be wonderful. Stefan, do you want to speak from the podium or the comfort of your armchair? Perfect. Thank you. Over to you.
Is this working? Yes.
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you very much. Sorry, I have a hard stop at 5:30. So it's great to be here. First of all, let me congratulate the United Arab Emirates for joining PPCA. There really is momentum. I think the UAE is now the 11th new member since the beginning of COP. So that is really, really fantastic. And it's very good that we're talking about coal. In these COP discussions, we are talking about fossil fuel, and it's all center stage in the discussions. How are we going to address the issue of fossil fuel phase out, phase down, unabated, non-unabated, emissions, sources, and so on. But let's not forget, as Andrew Steer said, that coal is about half of the problem. 45%, almost half of the problem of fossil fuel is coal. And that is something that my president was keenly aware when he came to Cop28. We have made progress on coal. We made progress at Cop26. We made significant progress at G20 with a blanket commitment from all G20 members to stop financing of coal at export for export credits, but unfortunately we still see that there's a lot of coal being built. And therefore my president convened a couple of days ago a set of distinguished colleagues ranging from the EU to the World Bank to GFANZ to Bloomberg, with some emerging countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and said we need to address that issue and we need to see how the private sector can be disincentivized from investing in coal. Hence the idea for a global, for coal transition accelerator. We already have an energy transition accelerator. Now we have a coal transition accelerator, which will try and address the following. First of all, work with the World Bank to try and have to try and see how we can differentiate interest rates. Why should a company be able to access interest rates in for building a coal plant at the same rate as for building a renewable energy? We should incentivize differentiated rates in order to make sure that the right investments are being made. The second one is the Coal Transition Commission that will put people together to try and see how the private sector can be incentivized into decommissioning coal. And that is what we're going to be working on. And we'll also task the OECD and the IEA to work on a gold standard to call what an investment in coal is, a future stranded asset, to have these gold standards to really, again, incentivize into the right energy sources. So we'll be working on this. You'll hear more about it. You'll hear more about it at the World Bank and the IMF assemblies, and hopefully we can move forward very, very forcefully on this.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much for being so engaged in this public, private and multilateral levers. It's wonderful to hear. Graham, my right honourable Graham Stewart, you and I have shared ministerial portfolios. I'm so thrilled that you're with us. Tell us a little bit about the UK and this long-term commitment.
Thank you, Claire. It's working, so that's great. And it's lovely to be introduced by one of my predecessors, and to follow Stefan, who I also very much appreciate working with. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the UK and the Powering Past Coal Alliance. I'm grateful to our hosts, the UAE Presidency, for convening today's event, because if we are serious about 1.5 degrees, and we need to be, we must consign coal power to history, because the science is unequivocal. Coal power is the single biggest source of global emissions, and therefore the biggest single contributor to climate change, which is already afflicting people all around the world. In fact, analysis from the International Energy Agency shows we cannot afford to build a single new coal power plant if we're to keep the Paris Agreement in reach. And yet, of course, the reality is that coal remains the biggest source of electricity in the world, accounting for more than a third of global power production. For the second year in a row, global coal-fired generation has gone up again and reached a new all-time high, pushing record levels of carbon into the atmosphere. Clearly, we do need collectively to raise our ambitions if we're to get back on track for 1.5 degrees and net zero. And that doesn't just mean stopping the building of any new coal power plants, but as Stefan has rightly said, retiring existing fleets early and scaling up clean power in its stead. Now, is this doable, you might ask? And in the UK, we are proud to be leading the way, despite accounting for nearly 40% of our electricity, nearly 40% just 11 years ago. Next year, coal will account for no generation whatsoever, absolutely zero by the end of next year. And how have we done that? Well, we've replaced it with renewables. We've gone from an energy mix with less than 7% of our electricity coming from renewables in 2010 to nearly 50% in the first quarter of this year. These steps, amongst others, have allowed us to cut our emissions, I'm pleased to say, by more than that of any other major economy on the planet. But we're also determined to support nations of all sizes to take similar action to end their reliance on coal. This isn't a competition. We don't win by ourselves. We only win when we work together as humanity, because we only have one planet. That's why this week we've endorsed the Coal Transition Accelerator, and I'll be speaking later to call for further action still on coal. It's also why I'm proud of the work we're doing with the Powering Past Coal Alliance. And Claire may have mentioned her role, but since launching the alliance with Canada in 2017, the alliance has offered unparalleled support to anyone who commits to phasing out coal, including advice on how to create the right financial environment and recognition of the political challenges which are inherent in this endeavour. Today, we are proud that more than 180 governments and organisations have signed up, and as has been said, just this week the number of new members have joined the alliance, including the United States, the Czech Republic and Kosovo. And it's a pleasure today, of course, to welcome our newest members, our hosts, the UAE and Malta, both joining the alliance. And I've no doubt that together we can develop the policies and guidance required to speed up the global replacement of coal power, to find the financial instruments and support for coal power which isn't nearing the end of its life, to be taken out of the system, and inspire every other nation here at Cop28 to follow our example. So let's not waste the momentum sparked by events like this. Let's learn from each other and work to change the way we power the world. Let's fight for a cleaner, more sustainable future by leaving coal power in the past.
Great, and thank you for incredibly powerful words, and thank you for your continued commitment and leadership. It's wonderful. Felix, would you share with us, you're the Undersecretary of the Department of Energy in the Philippines, where there is a coal challenge, which we're here to help with. Give us some perspective from your country.
Yes, thank you, Claire. Thank you again, UK, for the Philippines Energy Pathway Calculator. It's the Philippine brand of 2050 calculator of the UK. So we really need to be numbers-based and science-based. So the Philippine power sector first is unique because it is market-driven and privately owned. So as explained by ASEAN CEO Eric Francia earlier, the private businesses, it's the decisions of the private businesses that will really drive this activity and move forward, because it should be based on economics. And also, in the Philippines, it is unsubsidized. Therefore, the cost of the transition, as well as the need for the greater investment infrastructure, will be fully borne by our already overburdened electricity consumers, if we will not find strategic ways to shift the burden. That's why we're very happy with the collaboration with ADB and the other speakers. So in line with this ETP program, the Philippine government is encouraging a voluntary, early and orderly decommissioning or repurposing of existing coal-fired power plants while securing a stable supply and addressing the climate emergency by ramping up the renewable energy target of 50% share by 2040. So that is embraced in the Philippine Department of Energy's plan, and we therefore again applaud ASEAN in pioneering the voluntary retirement of 246 megawatts of its coal-fired power plant in SL Tech. This is consistent with our view, and they are trailblazing in doing this voluntarily, in making business sense. That is why we applaud Eric and his team. We also encourage every effort to incentivize the business owners and institutions that will participate in similar undertakings and works towards the energy transition, the ADB and the ASEAN's energy transition mechanism concept, which leverages public and private investments with the aim of retiring coal power assets on an earlier schedule, is indeed laudable. It's out of the box. But we must also emphasize that our energy transition is beyond coal retirement. It also entails expanding the people's access to electricity in remote islands, building a smart and green grid, and improving the distribution system, putting up more energy storage systems and making energy affordable for all, and making sure that no one is left behind. In all these, adequate and timely access to climate financing is crucial for the Philippines to equitably and effectively pursue the energy transition.
Thank you so much, and thank you for pointing out, Felix, no plant is an island. Something has to come along to deal with the increased demand. Great point. Great pleasure to see Catherine Stewart, who Catherine McKenna and I had this wild idea for PPCA. Thank you so much for your continued involvement and leadership in that. Tell us a bit about the broader Canadian position.
Thank you, and it's great to be here to be able to talk about the importance of coal phase-out for power. And I do remember that moment in 2017 when you and Catherine McKenna as ministers launched this initiative. And it's wonderful to see that in just 6 years, the PPCA has really been a leading force behind global efforts to phase out emissions from coal power. And now we have over 180 members, and we're absolutely thrilled. On Saturday, we welcome 10 new members, including the United States, and that today we are welcoming the UAE into the alliance. Together, we really are charting a path forward from coal power. This is hard, but it is possible. Here we are discussing the global stocktake, and it is abundantly clear that if we keep going at the rate we are going, we are not going to meet the 1.5-degree goal. So we really have to acknowledge this and adjust our ambitions accordingly. That's why the Alliance is calling for explicit outcomes on coal to form part of a really credible mitigation package here at Cop28. There are 3 steps we must take. First, we must scale up support for clean energy, including the global goal to triple renewable energy and double energy efficiency. Second, we must recognize the need to phase out unabated fossil fuels in line with net zero goals. And as part of this, accelerate coal power phase out and not just phase down. And third, we must commit to no new unabated coal power. We know that putting these commitments into practice will require support. And that's why Canada has made a commitment to energy transition and coal phase out as part of its pillar of climate finance, our $5.3 billion in climate finance. And we made a landmark contribution to the Climate Investment Fund, accelerating coal transition as part of that of $1 billion. We're very proud to support the Just Energy Transition partnerships and with Indonesia, Senegal, Vietnam, and South Africa, and we're very committed to supporting those who are on that journey to coal phase out, including those who are still very reliant on coal power. The great thing about being part of this alliance is that members can share their experiences and help people work through mutual challenges. And the transition is really at hand, and our clean future is within reach. So please join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and last but not least, we have a very powerful country who has finally decided to join, and this is part of an extraordinary pivot for the energy transition. Rick, we're so glad you joined us. Please tell us a bit about the US's commitment to coal phase-out.
Yeah, thank you. And we're thrilled to be here as the United States in the Powering Past Coal Alliance. I think we've all been clear about the problem statement. We can't deliver on the promise of the Paris Agreement unless we address unabated coal emissions. And so we have chosen to underscore our commitment to ending coal emissions by joining the Powering Past Coal Alliance here at COP28. Domestically, the United States hasn't built a new coal power plant in over a decade, and we have reduced our coal emissions by more than half. So we are on a road to carbon-free electricity by 2035 per President Biden's goals, and addressing coal emissions is central to that journey. We're proud to add our voice to this important coalition of national and subnational governments, businesses, and other organizations working to accelerate the transition from unabated coal to clean power. And it starts with stopping all the new unabated coal power plants that are still under construction. And just to be crystal clear, there's 500 gigawatts of new unabated coal power plants still in the pipeline, much of it already under construction. And to put that in context, if that really gets built, that would negate everything that the United States and Europe are doing to address coal power plant emissions in this decade. So it's very important that we get on top of that issue. At the same time, we do need to also address existing coal power plants and their emissions. So to get at these dual challenges, we support the use of carbon markets to accelerate all of this. And we very strongly favor a sectoral or jurisdictional approach to crediting for these kinds of efforts. And that really builds on hard-earned experience in the forestry and land sector with RED+. As you've already heard from Andrew Steer and Mary Grady, that's the approach that we're taking with the Energy Transition Accelerator. We already have 10 companies that have signed a letter of interest for the ETA, 3 pilot countries, Chile, the Dominican Republic, and Nigeria. And our preliminary estimates are that this approach, crediting under the ETA, could mobilize as much as $200 billion in transition finance through 2035. And some of this finance may go to early coal retirement and decommissioning. But let me be clear, the Energy Transition Accelerator is not designed to do project-by-project coal retirement or decommissioning. That simply will not work as a strategy. We have to have a more sectoral or jurisdictional approach that propels clean electricity in order to displace unabated fossil generation. Why? Because it incentivizes the long-term structural change that involves the full suite of what's required, from renewables to transmission to storage and the policies to make it possible. And secondly, and this is really critical, this is the best way to have environmental integrity, including additionality and avoiding emissions leakage, as we've seen in the land sector. It doesn't pay to have a coal plant shut down and just have another one ramp up its generation in response. Also, the Energy Transition Accelerator has guardrails to ensure that buyers have science-based targets when they buy these credits. And lastly, just to close, we are working in a strategic collaboration with the World Bank through its Scale Trust Fund to encourage sovereign governments as off-takers. So we're thrilled to be here as part of this discussion. It is top of the list of what needs to be done to keep a safer 1.5C future within reach.
Say one more your next things. I don't think I have ever been at an international event, certainly not at a COP, where we have delved so much into the reality of this transition. We had a look at the problem, the role of markets. We dived in with Vishal's panels to this intellectual depth that is trying to deliver high-quality assets. We had a wonderful catch-up with Elizabeth's panel that really demonstrated the financial flows that are available and showed that there are pilot projects coming on stream now. We will learn by doing. We will prove up what we need to do for this transition. And again, look at the extraordinary range of governments that we have here who are working to solve their own emissions challenges, but prepared to cooperate and to deal with this very tough reality that we face. So just in closing, I really do want to thank once again the COP presidency and also the team who have worked so hard on this. This is an extraordinary event and shows that there are real solutions. I feel much better informed, more optimistic, and really keen to see how I can support the solutions proposed today. And I hope that you share that feeling too. Thank you very much. Thank you.